we jump into questions, I would love for you to give us a little introduction about you, because not only is this your first time talking with the First Moon Readers, but this is our first formal introduction as well. So if you would like to talk about a little where you're from, your pronouns, and I'm always really nosy about personality types. So if you've done Enneagram or MBTI, I would love to know.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, Cleo's in the background and it's my dog.
It's okay.
She's being so naughty. So my name is Ethaney. My pronouns are she, her. I grew up in the Bay Area, California. My personality type is INFP. I actually don't know much about it, but I feel like from what I've read before, it fits pretty well. I'm sorry, Cleo's distracting me. What was the other part for the introduction? I'm sorry.
Or anything else you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I'm so happy that you reached out to me about PMDD. It's something that is very dear to my heart. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I feel like a lot of people a lot of women should speak about it more. I am so sorry. Is she distracting? Hold on
No,
one
it's okay. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Hold on. I am so sorry. She's being horrible today. My partner is like so annoyed with her. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I feel like PMDD is just a lot of women don't know a lot about it. They know that there's something maybe not right um, with them during their cycle, but they've never heard of it or they're just not sure what it is. So I am always so happy to talk about it, and I feel really honored that you reached out to me. So
I'm honored to be speaking with you today. I first followed your Instagram because of your food content, and then you were posting about PMDD, and I was like, this is the best of both worlds. I love your account so much.
that means so much to me. That means a lot.
So I was wondering if you could jump in by talking about your just general experience with PMDD.
Okay. So in my early 20s, I was on hormonal birth control. I was just on the pill. And I started noticing that I would feel really bad. I mean, it wasn't just a regular PMS. I was starting to feel really hopeless, really, really depressed. And on some months, I was starting to feel really suicidal. And I knew that something wasn't right. This wasn't normal PMS. This felt more extreme, a little bit more debilitating. So at the time, I didn't have any health insurance. So I went to Planned Parenthood, and I was talking to I think it was a physician's assistant. And I was like, I've been on 5 different types of pills and I feel the same every month. A week before my period, I feel like I just want to die. Is this normal? And she asked me a few questions. I can't really remember what questions she asked, but she was like, have you ever heard of PMDD? And I was like, no, never heard of that in my life. And she was like, well, I think that this might be something that you should look into. It sounds like it could fit what you're experiencing every month. And in my 20s, I was not the most responsible with my health. And I kind of brushed it off. I was sort of like, okay, yeah, whatever. Can you give me a new form of birth control? Because I need something and this just isn't working. She had recommended to me that I seek additional help that maybe Planned Parenthood couldn't provide me in regards to PMDD. And I sort of just brushed it off. My main goal of that day was I need a fast fix. And if that means getting on a different type of birth control, can we just do that? And I will follow up later. So I was on the pill. I tried the NuvaRing. I tried the patch, and I would just feel the same every month. And it was getting to the point where I was very much isolating myself. I was in a relationship at the time, and I just didn't want to be there. I didn't know how to cope really with what was going on with me. Um, so after that relationship ended, I actually went completely off birth control. And I felt a slight improvement in my mood. And I noticed that my PMS was maybe not as bad, or I was able to just sort of ignore it because I wasn't in a relationship. I lived alone. My PMDD at the time like didn't really have such a strong effect on anyone else except me. So it was almost easier to ignore, if that makes sense. Um, I fast forward, and when I turned 30, my PMDD came back like full force. Um, and in doing a lot of research about PMDD, a lot of women will start to feel PMDD more as they get older. It can get worse as you get older. And so when I turned 30, I just remember one month it hit me so crazy. And I had just started dating my now fiance, and I could tell he was kind of surprised by this switch in my personality. And I was like, oh shit, like it's coming back and it's bad. Like my PMDD also kind of transformed into this very overwhelming sense of paranoia and sensitivity to rejection. I feel like all of my baggage would like come out during my PMDD, and it blew up my life basically. My relationship was really suffering. I wasn't able to cope. I could barely do anything. And so last November, I kind of reached a breaking point where I felt so mentally sick. I felt so ill. I will never forget, like, we were in the car driving somewhere, and I had been just miserable. We had been fighting. I had been so paranoid. I was paranoid that he was cheating on me. I was paranoid that he felt differently about me. And I just knew all of this like wasn't normal. Like, there is no way that this is regular PMS. And I started remembering about my experience at Planned Parenthood, where they were like, have you heard of PMDD? And so in November of last year, I started fantasizing about basically ways to die. And it was I think a week and a half before my period. And we were in the car, and Jeremy was trying to take me on a car ride to make me feel better. And I just remember just fantasizing about ways I could just kill myself. And I started crying. I was like, we need to go home. Like, I feel sick. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, I need help. And so I reached out to my OBGYN, and she didn't really listen to me. And she basically told me, next time I feel suicidal, call 911. And I was like, no, like, this is like, I'm like, there's something seriously wrong with me. So I had to really advocate for myself, because one of your questions brought up being worried about being misdiagnosed as bipolar. And that was something I was very, very scared about, because a lot of my symptoms could come across as bipolar. So I had to advocate for myself to find a new OBGYN. And after talking to her, she immediately diagnosed me with PMDD. And I got connected to a psychiatrist, and I've been getting help ever since then. I'm sorry, I feel like I rambled on and on. I hope that it was not too much. But
No, I loved hearing about it. Especially because a lot of the symptoms that you brought up like remind me of things that I've gone through, like especially the paranoia and the suicidal ideations are all things that I go through as well. But obviously you experienced this during your 20s, but I was wondering if there were any like symptoms of PMD when you were younger, and what you thought was happening at that time.
So when I was younger, I got my period pretty early. I got my period when I had just turned 11. And I've always been a pretty sensitive kid, but I started realizing that I was very emotional during my teen years when I was on my period. Like, I would cry over everything. It wasn't just like cute crying. It was like I was very upset. I was deeply affected. I was very, yeah, I was just a very emotional kid. And I think my mom just sort of chalked it up to me being sensitive, and she didn't really think anything of it. But I knew that something was always a little off. Like, I don't know if you felt that way, where you just know that maybe what you're feeling isn't what your friends are feeling, and there's something just like a little bit different. Um, but I had no idea. I just assumed that I was just a sensitive, weird, overly emotional person, and that maybe I just PMSed a little bit worse than my friends. Because for me, it was never like, my PMS was never soothed by ice cream or, like whatever the cliche remedies are for bad PMS. Mine was like, I would rage or I would just be crying. I remember I'm a very calm person, minus or when I'm not in a PMDD situation. When I was 15, I was on my period, and my brother had like not done something, and he didn't play in a soccer game that we had to wake up early for. And I completely snapped. The rage I felt was uncontrollable, to the point where he locked himself in the bathroom and told my mom she needed to come home. I was throwing CDs at him. I was threatening to kill him. And I mean, like, that is a complete 180 than my normal personality. And so my family would kind of joke that it wasn't funny, but my family kind of joke like, oh, she's going through that thing again. And none of us knew what it was. I don't think even my mom related it to my period. But now I look back on that and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been suffering with this since I was a, a kid. Like, and I just had no idea. So
Yeah, I agree. I relate so much. I got my period when I was 10, so really young as well.
yeah.
And I've been experiencing like PMDD symptoms since like I got my period.
Mhm.
And as you were speaking about like asking your friends, oh, like are these symptoms similar to yours?
Yeah.
You know, no other like none of my friends really spoke about menstruation, but like when we did, it was more of a physical thing. Like, oh, I have cramps, oh, my head hurts, or my boob hurts. But it
Yeah.
was never that emotional kind of connection. So I was just like, oh, I'm like just depressed. But
Yeah.
also my mom, like during her period, experiences like this PMDD symptoms. So I
Oh,
was just like, oh, this is like what my period is. Like it's more of an emotional thing than a physical thing, just like my mom.
yeah.
But my period lines up with my birthday every year. And I always am like super duper depressed on my birthday. Like, don't want to get out of my bed. There's nothing my family can do that will like make me want to appreciate my life. And like every year on my birthday, I have like suicidal thoughts, thoughts of self harm. And it's been like really hard. And that was when I was like, oh, something's wrong, especially because like the next week or the week before, you're like completely fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
It's so
nothing.
weird.
It's like you are completely back to yourself and you're just like, what just happened? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like completely out of body. But as I spoke about my mom, I was wondering if you had any menstruators in your life that you saw had PDD symptoms as well, because it can be genetic.
Yeah. So my mom, she has not experienced anything like I've experienced. She did have menopause really early. She went through menopause like in her right when she turned 40. So any mood fluctuations, like it was because of early menopause. But my grandmother, has very similar when she was basically like known in our family to be prone to rage and like anger and irritability, but no one really talked about it, especially in my family. Like my mom and I are probably the only really open ones, and because my grandmother is older, she I don't think would have the insight to attribute any personality, symptoms like with her period. But I do think about, like, I wonder if my grandmother also suffered from PMDD symptoms but just had no idea and had no one to talk to, and just assumed that it was like because of stress or past trauma or just the stress of being like a single mom. But I mean, like, I do think about that now, and I wish that my family, my grandmother especially, was able to communicate more about that, because it would give me a lot more insight into where this actually comes from in regards to genetics. Because I don't think my mom has it, but if I were to think of anyone in my family, it would definitely be my grandmother, just because a lot of her anger and her rage and irritability feels very familiar to me, and I almost understand it, where everyone else in my family is just like, she's crazy, like there's something wrong with her. But there's something with that where I empathize with her, and I can understand how her anger is like she can't control it sometimes, because that's how I felt when I wasn't on medication to help me with PMDD. So
Yeah, talking about medication, I know that you are on medication for PMDD, and I was wondering what that process was like. Were there any fears or apprehensions when it came to choosing to go on medicine, and how does was it a struggle to find the right one for you, and how has it been beneficial?
yeah, so I was terrified to go on medication. I have a background in social work, and so for 10 years I worked with clients that were on antidepressants, and I could see the negative effect it would have on some people. And so with that knowledge, I was really, and I felt hypocritical, right? I would encourage my clients to stay on their medication, and here I was terrified of being on meds. But last November, I realized that the suicidal ideations, like, I needed something more. And I had tried a bunch of other holistic treatments. I would go on the subreddit for PMDD, and I would read every question about natural supplements to help with it. And so I was on this supplement called DIM. I was taking vitamin D. I was taking ashwagandha root. I was trying so many natural ways to help myself, and nothing was working. So I got to the point where I was like, I need medication. It's come to the point where if I don't do something, my relationship's going to end and I'm going to blow my life up. Like, I just can't go on like this. So I reached out to, when I got connected with my psychiatrist, I voiced to him, I was like, I'm really scared of being on medication. I'm scared of the side effects. I'm scared of it not working. I'm scared of having to try 10 different types of medication to find the right one. But he was very kind and very patient. And I think he understood that I was very scared and that this was unfamiliar to me from a very personal standpoint. I don't know anyone else in my family that's taken psychiatric medication. So I felt very alone in this process. And he basically was like, let's put you on a daily dose of Prozac. Some women that have PMDD just take an antidepressant 2 weeks of the month, like right before their hell week and then after their period. But for me, my PMDD was so bad that he was like, you need to take medication every day. So I started with Prozac. I started with 10 milligrams every day. And I felt so much relief that first month. It felt unreal. I was sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was sort of like really paying attention to how I was feeling because I couldn't believe that it had already taken effect. And maybe some of it was just my own mind, like wanting it to work so badly. Um, I felt really lucky that I didn't experience any really negative side effects, except I did lose about 30 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, which was not good. And then it kind of triggered my old eating disorder habits, which it was sort of like I didn't know what to do. Like I knew I was falling in a really bad pattern of not eating because one of the side effects for Prozac, it could be loss of appetite. And for me, it was like immediate. I just stopped eating. I was fine eating maybe 500 calories a day, and that was it. And so my Jeremy was getting really concerned because he was like, okay, it's great. Your mood has improved so much, but you're also losing so much weight. Um, so that's been like the hardest part about medication is sort of like having to manage my eating habits along with staying on my medication because I wasn't willing to give that up. Like I wasn't willing to stop my Prozac. Um, and so eventually I got therapy to help with my eating disorder. And then now I feel like everything has like leveled out. I am on a higher dose of Prozac now. I am on 20 milligrams a day because my symptoms were coming back pretty forcefully out of nowhere, which really scared me. So I decided to go up a dosage, but I was pretty scared to do that as well. So
Speaking of holistic remedies, I
Mhm.
saw that you're doing traditional Chinese medicine. I was wondering what that experience is like because you've kind of inspired me because I'm trying to go the holistic route as well, like CBD, and then maybe
Yeah.
like learning more about traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah, so CBD is actually so helpful. I love CBD. I don't do well with THC, but CBD had before medication definitely offered me so much relief. Like
It has been my savior.
yes, oh my God, love it. Love CBD. Yeah, so my mom was very against me getting on medication. Like she was supportive in knowing that I needed help. She didn't really know how serious my PMDD was until she saw me really sick. When I would kind of hide it from my mom because she doesn't really culturally just doesn't really understand mental health, depression. Like she just doesn't get it. Um, so my mom had been seeing an acupuncturist, and um, she was like, "Would you be open to seeing Kim for treatment just to see if it helps?" And I do not want to be dependent on my medication forever. Like I just don't. And so I thought, okay, my medication the 10 milligram dosage is starting to not work as well. So why don't we just try this traditional Chinese medicine? And it's been honestly such an eye-opening experience. It's been so wonderful. I find it to be just there's something like healing about it that you feel like you're doing something really good for your whole body and you're not just targeting this like one problem, like you are taking care of like your whole self. And there's something really comforting about that, and the fact that these are methods that have been used for centuries. There's something just very safe and comfortable about it. And I feel like obviously medication's not for everyone. Traditional Chinese medicine isn't for everyone, but I really feel like medication, like pharmaceutical medication, is so bad for you that if you can find the option to try something that is natural and has a lesser chance of like harming you, why not just give it a try? And I've been really pleasantly surprised. I do acupuncture, cupping, and acupressure massage and herbal medicine. And I genuinely feel like when I leave those sessions, I feel just like a lot more calm and at peace. And I went last month during my cycle, and the difference I felt from when I entered so when I left was really profound. And so that kind of showed to me like there is something real about this. And I wish, or I hope that people have the opportunity to explore that option if they can. So I'm really excited for you. I hope that you find like relief in it and you enjoy it.
Yeah, I hope I find like a good person because I'm not sure like what to look out for.
Yeah.
Would you have any tips about that? Like how to
Yes.
find a good practitioner?
Yes. So a good acupuncturist, I feel like, definitely gives you tips on how to help yourself at home. So you're not relying on them to come in every appointment because that gets expensive. Like insurance doesn't always cover, acupuncture. So most of it is coming from out of pocket. And so a big red flag to me is like an acupuncturist who's like, oh, I don't know how many sessions it's going to take, but just come in every week. I think that a good practitioner who is there to really look after you will give you tips on how to help yourself at home on your own for free in your own house, like on your own time. My acupuncturist really stresses to me like what foods to eat, what foods to avoid. Um, it taught me ways I can massage my own body to like stimulate blood circulation. Like all these things are tips that I wouldn't know on my own. And it's really nice that I can help myself when I'm at home without having to go see her every time I'm feeling like crap. And so I think that's like my biggest tip is look for someone that wants to help you help yourself at home and understands that there are ways that you can help yourself feel better without relying on them or medication, and that there are natural holistic ways to to make yourself feel better. So I think that's like definitely my number one tip.
I'll definitely keep that in mind. I'll have to start
Yeah,
looking.
yeah, definitely.
Speaking of cooking, you're obviously an amazing chef.
Oh, thank you.
um, I was wondering, like, when you're approaching your cycle, is there any like foods that you avoid or add into your diet? And are there like any recipes that you find that are helpful in balancing your hormones? Because obviously there's so many foods that do that, like seed cycling and all these different things. I was wondering if you tried any of those.
So I have not tried seed cycling. I find it really fascinating, but I've not tried it. I have a very lazy approach to when it comes to cooking around my period. I am anemic, so I also have an extremely heavy flow, especially after I got my IUD taken out. Like my flow is absolutely insane. Like I don't mean to get graphic, but it's like I have to use like an ultra tampon. I bleed through that every 2 hours, and during the night I will leak 4 or 5 times. So I often feel really weak, and then it leaves me feeling just overall really shitty. So I try to get as much iron as possible. I love using recipes that are very rich in dark greens, like kale, a lot of spinach. I don't eat a lot of beef, but I will make an effort before my period to try to eat as a little bit of red meat, even if it's like a small steak, just something. And I just like to eat food that makes me feel good and happy because it's such an unhappy time of the month that I really try to eat things that feel comforting and nourishing, even if it's not the most healthy. So I think that my food philosophy is I just want to eat what makes me feel good and makes me feel happy. And if it can provide me iron and nutrition, that's even better. Um, but I love, like, my number one period meal, I think, is I love beans with greens and bread. To me, that's just like my favorite because it's really filling and there's something really comforting to me about beans and toast. So I would love to share a recipe with you.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll write it out and send it to you.
Thank you. Because I also have an extremely heavy flow.
Yes.
Um,
Oh my God.
on my period, my body is just like, I need a burger, a burger.
Yes. Oh my God. That is a thing in our house, a period burger.
Oh my God. It any anger that I'm feeling is cut in half by a nice burger.
Oh my gosh, I agree. There is something so good about eating a good burger on your period. I don't know what it is, but it is seriously the best. I agree with you completely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Like I'm always on the hunt. Like
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Oh, that sounds good right now,
I
actually.
know.
Yeah.
But going back to your general PMD experience, I would love to know more about like what it was like to be diagnosed, especially because you were talking about not being heard the first time and being heard the second time, and what that journey was like.
Yeah. So I talk about last November a lot because it was like a very pivotal moment in getting diagnosed and getting help. So I reached out to my OBGYN and I wrote her this long message. I was that day that we got back from the drive and I was like crying and I felt just so, I've never felt so mentally sick in my entire, I couldn't even figure out what was going on in my own head. Um, so I reached out to my OBGYN and I wrote her a really long message, basically begging her for help. I was like, something isn't right. Like, I feel so sick. This is what I'm experiencing. I was telling her that I felt really paranoid. Um, and when I mean paranoid, I mean like I wasn't hearing voices, but I couldn't trust what was real and what was in my head. And I was very scared of saying that because I feel like a mental health professional could take that as being like, okay, there's something more serious going on. Like maybe we should screen for bipolar because it was like, I really couldn't trust my own reality. And that was probably the scariest part. Um, and so my OBGYN responded like 2 days later and was like, next time you're going through this, just call 911. And I could not believe the lack of like sensitivity and just how cold and cruel her message was. Because if you read my message, it was very clear that I was sick and that I was desperate and I was really scared. I think I even wrote, I'm feeling really scared right now. I feel like I'm out of control. So I was really upset and I was like, okay, I need to find a different doctor. I don't care how long this takes me. I don't like, what if I didn't have a plan to hurt myself, but what if I went there? So I just went to Kaiser's website. I looked through a bunch of OBGYNs and I chose a woman of color who I felt like could understand me. I just wanted to feel like there was someone out there that I could feel connected to, who could understand what I was going through and take me seriously. And I just felt maybe like as a woman of color to another woman of color, there would be like a bond there. And I think I was just very desperate. I was just very scared and sad. And so I reached out to this new OBGYN and I basically sent the same message. And she responded within an hour. And she was like, can we have a phone call right now? And it was just that immediate response and feeling like someone actually gave a shit about what I was going through and called me was amazing. And so we had a phone appointment, and I just told her everything that was going on. I was telling her, I don't want you to think I have bipolar, because I don't. It's related to my period. And I told her that how angry I would be, like uncontrollably angry, uncontrollably irritable. I was so sensitive to any like perceived changes in tone from Jeremy. If he just looked at me a little bit different, I would flip out. I would be like, you're cheating on me, or there's something weird going on. Um, I couldn't distinguish what was real and what was made up in my own head. And that was very scary to me, because I was like, how could what I'm perceiving not be real? And you're telling me it's not real, but I feel like this is really happening. And so when I spoke to my OBGYN, I was like, I promise, like, I know what bipolar is and I'm not bipolar. Because so many women that have PMDD get misdiagnosed as bipolar. And I just did not want that to happen. And she listened and she was like, yeah, I think you definitely have PMDD. And it felt just very validating to hear that. It was like relief that there was a name, official name to what I was experiencing every month. And in turn, that felt like there was a possible way to help me. So I then got connected to a psychiatrist who basically just confirmed my diagnosis and then got me started on medication. And I think it's really rare to find a psychiatrist that takes, especially a male, that takes women's health very seriously. And he's been really great. And I feel really lucky and privileged that I have a care team that believes PMDD is like a real thing and is very attentive and validating, and um, was reassuring that like you aren't crazy, like this is a real thing and it sucks, and like let's just figure out how to make you feel better. So I have told women before, like if your first doctor doesn't believe you, or if your first doctor brushes you off in any way and is just like, oh no, like you're fine, like you need to go exercise more, or like you need to get more rest, like get a different doctor. It is not worth it. And I feel like women need to, as crappy as it is, like we need to really advocate for ourselves, especially with something like PMDD that is relatively new and not a lot of people, even doctors, are familiar with it. So I just really encourage women to like keep trying until you find someone who listens to you and believes you and understands what you're going through.
I'm so glad that you were able to finally find relief. And I completely agree with like and relate to that statement about trying to find women of color to relate to in the medical field. I actually had like sought out therapy for my PMDD, and I was specifically looking and like you had like set filters, and I was like, she has to be a woman of color, please.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so important. I feel like just having that understanding that a white woman would not be able to understand, especially when I feel like being Asian, like for me being Korean, there's a cultural aspect too, where I have to figure out ways to get my family to understand, because we aren't big on mental health, or my mom doesn't, believe in it or whatever. So having that common ground, I feel like was so important. And I'm, I'm glad that you can understand where I'm coming from. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering if you've sought out therapy for PMDD. I know that you spoke about having the therapy relating to your ED, but has it been any help to you, or has it been like
I feel like it has not been the help that I wanted. When I first called Kaiser and I got connected with my psychiatrist, it was like a mandatory, I had to see a therapist, especially because of the suicidal ideations. So I had about 4 or 5 sessions, and I feel like I didn't find it helpful. And I think that that has to do with finding a therapist is so personal, and like you have to find someone that you connect with. And I was sort of just matched with this woman that basically kind of made me feel like maybe I wasn't really experiencing anything that was too severe. And I was, it was just not a good fit. And I couldn't ask for someone new because it was like we were matched together. So to that question, I haven't found therapy to be useful for my PMDD yet. I'm hoping that eventually I will be able to find a therapist that is really helpful and I connect with and can offer that emotional support. But I haven't been able to find um, a therapist for that. And I haven't seen a therapist for PMDD specifically so far. Have you? Have you found it helpful?
I also did not have a great experience with it either. Um, because it'd be one week I'd have like nothing to say. I'd have an amazing week, everything was fine. And then my period would come and obviously it'd be like a really angry week. I'd be super upset. Um, and like the session wouldn't go the way I wanted it to, and then I'd be angry at my therapist. I'd be like, this
Yeah.
sucks, like she sucks.
Yeah. Oh my
and,
God. Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
then you like feel bad. I felt bad because I was like, she doesn't suck, like she's just doing her job. And I just wasn't able to find the relief that I wanted to. And also as a college student, I was like looking for my cheapest option. Like she was very nice and I really appreciate her. She still messages me today. um, but like I also agree that therapy is something that you really have to work at and find
Yeah.
your best match, and
Yeah.
we just weren't, and that was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope that you find like a therapist that you really like and connect with. I feel like it just takes time. I feel like it's like finding someone to date. It's like, it's a process. Like you have to feel connected to that person and you have to just have like a certain amount of chemistry, I feel like, and that can be really hard. So I hope that you find someone soon. I wish there was like an easier process to find a good therapist. But
Yeah, I agree, thank you. Also,
yeah.
there's so many, like therapy is also so hard to find with insurance. Like insurance does not provide enough
I
resources.
know. I feel like mental health, like, it's just not prioritized enough, especially in America. So I feel you completely.
So moving on, I was wondering what your PMDD essentials were, or just like essentials when you're going on your period. Like we spoke about CBD. I was wondering if there was anything else.
So CBD is definitely an essential. I really prioritize being lazy. I feel like I always put other people first, and I was ashamed of my PMDD, so I would try to pretend and act like everything was fine and that like I could carry on life as normal, and I would become even more overwhelmed and like stressed out and like depressed and angry. And so I feel like it's become an essential to allow myself to not see people, not even my own family, be really lazy, not cook, like not do things that I feel like I'm forcing myself to do. And I feel like women put so much pressure on themselves to like do everything and keep busy and be overly nice and not put themselves first. And I feel like PMDD has really taught me like it's okay to be selfish sometimes, like you have to be. And so I definitely make a point, like I will tell people, hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm having a really bad PMDD week. I can't meet with you today. Or like, hey, I might not be as communicative or responsive because I'm having a bad week. I think also communicating with people, letting them know like, hey, this is something I'm experiencing. It's not personal. I don't mean to be shitty, but like I need to like take some time. So I think that it's CBD. eating comforting foods that make me feel really happy, and just taking space and time for myself, allowing myself the space to say no or like pass on plans, and just take good care of myself during that time, I think is really, really important. And I think that's those three are probably my top three essentials when it comes to having a really bad hell week. Is just be good to you, like take good care of yourself.
Yeah, allowing yourself space is such a good essential. I think a lot of menstruators feel pressured to be the kind of person on the ads and on always ads where they're like playing sports and they're like
Yeah,
all
and
this stuff.
it's not realistic. Even if you don't have PMDD and you just have a really bad month of PMS, like allow yourself the space to take care of yourself. Like don't push yourself. You don't owe anybody anything except yourself, like the space to feel better. And yeah, I think that's really important, and I wish that it was easier to do, and I wish that more women felt comfortable doing that. And yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, because there have been too many times where I'm at work and like somebody says something wrong to me and I almost start crying.
Yeah, of
It's just
course.
like
Oh my goodness.
it's
Yeah,
not worth it.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe this is my final question, just making sure, sadly, because I really enjoyed talking with you
Oh,
today.
okay, I have loved this. I hope I'm not talking too much. I hope I'm not rambling.
No, I love it. I love it.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
But I was wondering if you had any advice for any young menstruators that are going through PMDD or think that they have it. This also is secretly a question for me. It's a little bit selfish. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Yeah.
That's a great question. I feel like there's a level of shame around how we feel around PMDD, like, because we know like that it is sort of the worst version of ourselves when we are going through this. Like, we are not, it's not who we are as people. And so I feel like there's like a sense of shame. I know I definitely felt shame around how I would act. And so I would try to hide it, or I would try to suppress it, and it would just come out in like the worst ways, because you can't like keep it tightly bandaged up, I feel. So I would really encourage anybody who feels like there's something wrong to really talk to somebody about it. Don't feel embarrassed, don't feel ashamed. It's not normal, but there's also nothing wrong with you. And there's no need to suffer. I feel like I've told a lot of women, like when I've gotten questions about it, is there's no need for us to suffer in silence. And that's such an isolating feeling. PMDD is isolating in itself, because I feel like unless you have it, you don't know what it feels like. And it's 100 times worse than just regular PMS. Like, there's something really sad and lonely about it. And I wish I didn't suffer alone for so long. I wish I felt empowered enough to talk about it with a doctor or my mom or someone I trusted, just so that I could get help earlier. So I feel like I just really encourage women of any age to not suffer alone, and to really talk to somebody that they trust about what they're feeling. And even if it's not PMDD, like if you're feeling really bad, find someone to talk to about it, because you don't need to go through it alone. And if it is something more serious, like, you deserve to get help, and you deserve to find ways to make yourself feel better and cared for, and yeah, healthy mentally, emotionally, and physically. It's such a horrible feeling to feel like you're going through something and you don't know what to do. And so yeah, I just really encourage women to advocate for themselves, talk to someone about it, fight the feeling of suffering alone. Like, I think that's my biggest thing, is just like, don't do that to yourself. And try to talk to someone right away.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And also, as you said before, to advocate for yourself. I've read that like it's important that you've like tracked your symptoms a couple months before like going into like try to advocate for yourself at the hospital, which is something I've also begun doing because I'm like ready to go and like get
Yeah,
this.
yes. That's such an important point. Definitely track your symptoms. If you can, like, download, I use two apps. I use Cycle and I use Flow. I like Cycle more because I can actually write out notes within the app for that day of how I'm feeling, just for like not only your doctor but for yourself. Because if you do decide to find treatment like holistically, or if it's medication, it's really encouraging to see what progress you feel for yourself. And so, yeah, I feel like I can't believe I forgot to say that. Definitely track your symptoms as best as you can. And I feel like it's just important in regards to advocating for yourself with a doctor.
Yeah, I also use Flow and Cycle as well. And I
Yeah.
think Flow now has a notes app, I think.
Ooh,
So
that's
that's
nice.
great.
Okay, I did not know that. Admittedly, I use Cycle a little bit more than I use Flow, but I like both. I think both are great.
I
Yeah.
think it's always hard to like try to use more than one period app at a time though. So I
Yeah, because I just get confused. I'm like,
yeah.
when did I start my period? Like, what is happening? So I agree. And I feel like, yeah, right now I'm a little bit partial to Cycle, but before I was definitely a Flow girl, like going through.
Well, I really want to thank you for sitting down and talking with me
Oh my God,
today. It's
of
been
course.
such an honor, and I can't wait to continue to stalk you on
Oh
Instagram.
my gosh, anytime you want to talk. And I'm so sorry about Cleo being the worst dog. I'm
With you, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
so
Bye.
Bye.